This is a guide on how to farm stack decks and how to profit from it. In this video I will go over how the farm works, what's required, and whether your build should do it or not. I will also go over the Atlas tree, explain what the investment looks like, and then cover the profit breakdown and what to expect. At the end I will show an example run on what this might look like. So how does it actually work? This farm revolves entirely around the divination scale of the cloister, which adds packs of monsters to your maps that have a chance to drop stack decks. We then scale those packs as much as possible to drop more decks. On top of that, we add rituals to the maps, since they can respawn some of those monsters, giving us even more chances for extra stack decks. Now what makes this farm good? If done even somewhat properly, the average map drops more chaos value in stack decks than what we invest into the map. That means that it has a really steady reward profile and doesn't need a big investment to start. Some other farms have large variance. You might need to run 10 or 20 maps before you hit something profitable. With this one, just having enough currency to invest into a single map can already get you going, since selling the decks from the first map covers the investment for the next map and then some. It's also a tier 16 based farm with only a medium scale investment, so we don't have to bother with tier 17 map rolling or worrying about getting high more multipliers. Any 8 mod tier 16 map with 5 cloister scales works perfectly fine. When it comes to requirements, while technically every build can do this farm, some builds handle the mechanics of the cloister monsters much better than others. The monsters spawned from the cloister scalps have proximity shields, which prevent most damage when you're outside of that shield. That means bow builds, for example, have a really hard time dealing with them unless they can somehow bypass or ignore those shields. There are 3 main ways to deal with this. First, you can simply enter the shield and damage the enemies normally. That means you either play a melee build, or you are tanky enough to stand in melee range as a bow or caster build. Second, you can use non-ailment damage over time effects like Essence Drain, Contagion or Corrupting Fever, which can hit through those shields. And third, you can use Proliferation. Like in my case, I use Ignite Proliferation to deal with those monsters. If your build can do any of these while still having good AoE clear, since a lot of those monsters spawn per map, you will be fine. If it can't, you can still do the farm, but it won't be nearly as smooth or efficient. On the Atlas passive tree, the goal is to maximize returns from the cloister monsters. The chance to drop stack decks doesn't scale with quantity, so there are 3 main ways to increase your deck drops. First, we scale pack size, since this increases the number of cloister monsters in the map. We do that by running 8 mod tier 16 maps, grabbing map mod effect on the tree. Second, we add rituals to our maps. When cloister monsters spawn on top of the rituals, those rituals can respawn them, giving us an extra chance to drop stack decks. This is a huge part of the profit, so it's mandatory. And third, we pick Eldritch Altars. It doesn't really matter if you pick Ether or Exarch. What we care about is the duplicate currency rewards modifier. Since stack decks count as currency, this mod can dupe them. So the choice between red or blue altars just depends on which one gives easier player downside mods for your build. The rest of the Atlas points are pretty flexible since they don't directly affect deck drops. In my setup I added some generic quantity for a bit more ground loot. I also took shrine nodes since they can add tankiness, damage or movement speed, which helps a lot with clear speed. You can skip those and take more scarab nodes instead if you prefer. So what do we actually need now and how do we run these maps? We need an 8 mod tier 16 map and 5 divination scarabs of the cloister. For map layouts there are 2 main options. You can run a map like Jungle Valley, which blocks boss altars from spawning and increases the chance for currency dupe altars. Or you can pick a smaller, tighter map layout to increase the chance that cloister packs and rituals overlap, since a lot of our decks come from those respawns. Personally, I prefer the second option and run Toxic Sewers. It has a really good layout with strong overlaps. The ritual altar often spawns on top of the boss, and the boss room usually spawns a lot of cloister monsters, which makes rituals there super profitable. On top of that, the narrow layout means very high monster density, which is perfect for explosions and prolif based builds. You can sometimes chain explosions or proliferations multiple rooms ahead. When you are in the map, the order you do things matters a lot if you want to maximize your deck drops. This is one of the biggest mistakes people make when trying this farm. First, rush to the boss and kill it right away. That prevents boss altars from appearing, which increases the chance to get currency dupe altars instead. Next, clear the rest of the map to spawn all the remaining altars, so you have the highest chance to get a currency dupe altar before doing rituals. And finally, this one is big, pay attention to how many cloister monsters spawn near each ritual. Rituals spawn the monsters from all previous rituals you've done. So you always want to do the ones with the most cloister monsters first, so they will keep respawning in the later ones. A typical map looks like this. Rush to the boss and kill it as soon as possible, clear the rest of the map, looking for currency dupe altars, and then do the rituals in order from the ones with the most cloister monsters to the least. You don't need to follow this perfectly every single time to make good returns, but sticking closer to it helps a lot. For example, if the boss has a ritual altar right on top of it, it's fine to just do it immediately to save time and backtracking. You don't need to count every single monster either. If you notice one ritual had way more monsters or dropped decks nearby, it's probably worth doing that one earlier. A little trick I like is to check how many decks drop around the ritual when you first clear the area. If you see 7 deck drops near one ritual and only 1 near another, it's a good indicator which one will spawn more when you actually do the ritual. It's still RNG, but it's a good general rule to follow while keeping things faster and more relaxed, so you don't have to concentrate as much. Now for the profit breakdown. I tested this over 20 maps. At the time of recording, Cloister Scarabs were 9C each, and an 8 mod Toxic Sewer cost 3C each, bringing the total investment to 48 chaos per map. Stack decks were worth about 1.5C each, which means we need 32 decks per map to break even. Across those 20 maps I dropped an average of 72 decks per map, which means 40 decks worth of pure profit, or around 60 chaos profit per map. That's not including any of the extra loot from rituals or the map themselves. Even in my worst maps I never dropped below 40 decks per map, and my highest was 120 decks. So while 72 might be on the higher side, 60 decks per map is a safe and conservative average once you've practiced a bit. For this test I made around 23.7 divines of pure profit, averaging 1.2 div or about 156 chaos per map. My current runs take about 3 to 4 minutes each when actively playing, which comes to roughly 18 divs per hour. On my league starter setup my runs took about 5 to 6 minutes, and even with 7 minutes per run it would still be around 10 div per hour. I also got around 40,000 gold per map on average, with 102 rarity due to the Mage Blood Gold Flask. Looking at the Path of Exile breakdown, roughly half of the profit comes from stack decks and the other half comes from random currency, map and scarabs that drop naturally or from rituals. In these 20 maps I excluded an enlightened drop since it was a lucky drop. I did however include the 7 years bad luck, since it's only 1.3 div and Path of Exile does not include any of the tier 16.5 maps, and I also didn't count some ritual rewards like corpses in this. Next I will showcase an important tip for Nameless Rituals, and then I show you an example run to demonstrate how the typical map looks like when you apply some of these strategies. When you find a Nameless Ritual, it is guaranteed to give you an audience with the king and some corpses. Important to know is that every time we reroll the favors, it is guaranteed 1 additional audience with the king. This means our top priority is to reroll 3 times and still have enough favor for the last roll. We do this by simply not buying anything from the first 3 lists and only deferring the audiences and good items like higher value corpses. Once we are on the last roll and have deferred everything we need, we can spend the rest of our tribute to buy things. This makes sure we get 4 audiences with the king on every Nameless Ritual. I hope this guide was helpful. If you have any questions left, feel free to leave them in the comments. If you've enjoyed the guide, feel free to leave a like or subscribe for future guide type content. Enjoy the example run.
You have fabricated your entire memory.